we start to sense that who we are is not just limited by the events of the world, but that we're connected to something vast, mysterious, and greater. Says Jack Kornfield in episode 276 of Heart Wisdom, a wonderful exploration on healing with love, hopeful wisdom for troubled times, with Jack and his beloved Trudy Goodman. This is an episode which took place at Esalen Institute in 2018, and I would like to thank the Voices of Esalen podcast and Sam Stern for reaching out and connecting me with this amazing talk that they gave. And yes, this audio is from 2018, but the content is so prescient. The main through line, so to speak, is a story that Jack shares of his time spent with Maha Ghosananda, who Jack describes as the Gandhi of Cambodia. This being who Jack witnessed firsthand during this horrible genocide, getting the Cambodian people to walk with the nobility and to chant Buddha's eternal wisdom. Hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone is healed. This is the ancient and eternal law. In essence, this episode becomes kind of a salve, an antidote for the rising cultural anxiety and feelings of despair that we may find ourselves in from time to time. I don't know if you've been feeling that recently. Seems to be on the menu. But that's why we're here. As Jack so often quotes from Thich Nhat Hanh, become the one calm person on the boat who can show the way for all. One of the more striking things about this talk is the beautiful interplay between Jack and Trudy. Next week will be part 2 of this episode, which will actually get into some fun question and answer sessions with the students at Esalen. But the reason I'm bringing this up right now is that Jack and Trudy have just released a brand new course on the spiritual practice of relationships. It's all about romance, all about how to navigate family relationships, work relationships. If you got a relationship, even with yourself, this course is for you. I was lucky enough to be at Spirit Rock when they were filming part of it, and even that small segment was life-changing. And my personal relationships have not been all just chai and chapatis. So I'm going to be taking this course right alongside of you because this is such crucial medicine for me as well. So I hope to see you there. It's at jackkornfield.com. How to Thrive in Love, Buddhist Secrets to Transform Your Relationships with Jack Kornfield and Trudy Goodman. You can jump in at any time, but if you're listening in 2025, if you sign up before February 24th, you will be able to take part in 2 live question and answer sessions with Jack. And for a day-long deep dive, Jack will be doing an online day-long for Spirit Rock on March 1st on mindful loving awareness. I'm not sure if you knew that Jack was into loving awareness, but this will be a day-long for new and experienced meditators. I have recently been jumping into the various Spirit Rock day-long retreats and their different online programs, and it's made my life so much cozier. I always, I guess before, used to see it as, it's retreat day. It's this big thing that you're working on and it's some self-improvement project, and that maybe pushed me away from it at times. But this is on a Saturday, and I just recommend you join and you have a leisurely Saturday. You make yourself some tea. Maybe you cast the video up onto your television and really settle in. Retreat is there for rest and for us to be able to work on ourselves within a safe container that is not totally engaged with our constant hamster wheel of a life. So if you can find the time and the space, I highly recommend joining this Mindful Loving Awareness day-long online for Spirit Rock on March 1st and chill and hang out and decompress with Sangha and learn about loving awareness with Jack. But also, why wait when you can do that right here and now for this wonderful episode 276 of Heart Wisdom, Healing with Love, Hopeful Wisdom for Troubled Times, with Jack Kornfield and Trudy Goodman. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you quiet your mind and open your heart. And may you meet these troubled times with hopeful wisdom and love. Namaste.
Good evening again. Most of you who are part of this beautiful week with Shauna and Dan and Tisha and all the rest of us. And then staff who've been invited. How many of you are on staff, just to know? Oh, wonderful. First of all, just thank you for all your good work. I've been coming to Esalen for 45 years, and the staff feels really great now. It feels very supportive and beautiful and helpful, so thank you for all that you do for us. So part of this evening, Trudy and I will talk some, and then we're going to make time for questions and answers and dialogue. Part of it is in response to the silence that we've begun starting midday today and will continue through tomorrow morning, and kind of honoring the sitting and walking and contemplative time you've given to yourself. And then part of it is also a response to how we take this and carry this in our lives, because it's one thing to be at Esalen, and some of you might already be signing up for another Esalen time in your mind before it ends. But another really important one is, how do we embody it? What do we carry? What's transformed us, or what informs us? And one of the most important things to understand about mindfulness, which is one of the central pillars of our practice today and this week and so forth, and it's been said, Shauna and others have said it, Dan, is that it's not just about sitting in meditation. There's a kind of cultural belief somehow in talking about mindfulness that it must mean close your eyes and be mindful. But in fact, mindfulness has two parts. The word in Sanskrit, sati sampajanya, is both to see clearly or to be present, and then to respond. So there's the presence, that's one part, and then there's the mindful response, that's the other. So it's relational in that way, just as we breathe in and breathe out. And in Zen, they say there are only two things. You sit and you sweep the garden. And it doesn't matter how big the garden is. It's really the garden of the world. So you quiet your mind and open your heart, center yourself, and realize that you can live from loving awareness, that who you really are is this loving awareness. And once you quiet the mind and tend your heart and heal what needs to be held with compassion, then you get up and you sweep the garden of the world. And what this teaches you is your sitting and walking practice, your formal training, is to see with the eyes of a Buddha, which is who you really are, that the world is like this. It has joy and sorrow and gain and loss and fame and disrepute, pleasure and pain, birth and death. And that you can bow to this and say, this is the human realm that I've been born into. So the Buddha, seated under the Bodhi tree, could see Mara come. Mara is sort of the embodiment in the Indian mythology of all the temptations and difficulties of life. And Mara came with his armies to attack all the aggression. And Mara came with all the temptations. And each time the Buddha would say, I see you, Mara. Is that you, Mara? Oh, I see you. No struggle, not getting lost, just saying this is the way things are. And so as we practice, there's some way in which we can actually see the world with the eyes of a Buddha, that this is the way that it is. And it brings it brings a radical shift in relationship to ourselves and to one another. A woman who was in the publishing world in New York City brought her mother to live with her in her big apartment in New York because her mother was losing her memory and had Alzheimer's. And she got a caregiver while she was away working at the publishing house. And she came home one day, and all the books, she had this big library of beautiful books and so forth, were strewn about the floor and in some boxes. And her mother declared, "I'm tired of all these dusty old books. I'm going to give them to my dentist." That was sort of the state of mind she was in. And the woman got really upset and said to the caregiver, "How could you let her do this? You're supposed to be taking care of her. All my precious books, everything, going to her dentist, it's crazy." And the caregiver wasn't in that place at all and looked back and said, "Madam," she said, "Alzheimer's is like this." Said, if this woman who's lost so much feels so out of control of her life now, if it gives her some comfort to take the books down and put them in the boxes today, I pack them. Tomorrow I unpack them and put them on the shelf. If this gives comfort to a woman who's lost so much, I am quite happy to do this, thank you. I just love being with her. And you can hear the difference of the kind of reactivity. We want the world to be a certain way, or we want our body or our mind to be a certain way. And then the understanding first that this is the way that it is. And then there comes in the capacity for compassion. And so that's the second vision that's possible. We see with the eyes of the Buddha. And we also then feel or open to the world with the great heart of the Buddha. And we sense our common humanity, that it's not just him or her and so forth, but that we're all in this together. We're all in the cycle of birth and death, changes in our body and changes in the world. As you could hear when we did our panel this morning and talked about what we would say to our 19 or 20-year-old self, it's easy to see us all sit up here and imagine how together we are, right? That we've got it all together and that it's been easy. But then you could actually begin to hear, oh, everybody has their measure of tears and their struggle and their family difficulties, if not in the beginning, then somewhere in the middle or the end. Come on, raise your hand if you don't. I want to meet you. And then there comes this common sense of humanity that this is us. And how do we hold this? Then our heart expands and we realize, yeah, this is what we're called to love. And if anything, maybe the whole art of meditation is simply the art of love. And then we also, as we sit and quiet ourselves and tend to all the emotions and all the stories and all the history and all the plans, all those things that say, plans are like this, sadness is like this, joy is like this. This is what makes up our humanity. Then we also can experience the vast vision, a timeless vision of the Buddha. Buddhist text says, like a star at dawn, a flash of lightning in the summer cloud, a rainbow, an echo, a dance, a dream, that everything appears for a time and then disappears. It's the way that it is. And it's kind of uncertain. We know it'll change, but we don't quite know how. And somehow we learn how to relax with that and open to see the star at dawn and say, oh, this is the star that's about to disappear. This is the rainbow. Let us really be present for this moment as it is. And as we see in that way, we start to sense that who we are is not just limited by the events of the world, but that we're connected to something vast and mysterious and greater. And at getting quiet at this magic place in Esalen, all of that opens to you. Thich Nhat Hanh, who writes, this body is not me. I'm not limited by this body. I'm life without boundaries. I've never been born, and I've never died. Like the ocean and sky filled with stars, they are all manifestations of the wondrous true mind. Since before time I've been free. Birth and death are only doors through which we pass, sacred thresholds on our journey. Birth and death are a game of hide and seek. So laugh with me, hold my hand. Let us say goodbye to meet again soon. We will meet again tomorrow. We will meet at the source of every moment. We meet each other in all forms of life because this is who we are. And there comes, we all know it. You know it when you've been making love or walking in the high mountains or listening to an amazing piece of music, sacred music, or taking sacred medicine, or being there for the birth of a child, or holding the hand of someone as they die and the gates between the worlds open and you realize that you're part of this great dance of mystery. And this is what you learn, as you said. Yes, you learn to be with all the experience, but you also learn to rest in loving awareness itself, in that vast consciousness. That's who you really are. My teacher, Maha Ghosananda, who was also a colleague and a friend, we lived in the forest monasteries for a long time, was the Gandhi of Cambodia. And during the Cambodian genocide and the Holocaust, we were hidden away in these remote jungle monasteries. And as soon as he was able to, he was a beautiful practitioner and a great scholar. He hurried back to work in the refugee camps, hundreds of thousands of people who poured out. And 19 members, all 19 members of Ghosananda's family were murdered. His temple was burned, the village, all intellectuals were killed, but he was saved because he was out of the country. And so he said, we have to build a temple in the refugee camps. And this was one of them. Several, Sakeo Kawidung, were filled with underground Khmer Rouge who said, if anyone goes to the temple, we will shoot you and kill you when you get out of this camp. But he got permission to make a little roof and a platform and put an altar. And we went through the camp and rang the bell. And 25,000 people filled the square. And he sat up and I thought, now what can he say? Here's a woman with only one of her 3 surviving children. And here's a grandmother with, only 3 of the 18 grandchildren she had, or an uncle. And the faces of trauma, as you know, refugees everywhere. I thought, what will he say? And he looked out and he put his hands together and he began to chant in Khmer, Cambodian, and in Pali, like Sanskrit, chants that they hadn't heard in some years. This verse from the Buddha, hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone is healed. This is the ancient and eternal law. And he sang it and chanted it over and over. And pretty soon they all started to sing and chant with him. And 25,000 people were weeping as they sang it. And I looked and I said to myself, in the midst of so much sorrow, he has spoken a truth that's even bigger than the sufferings that they have to hold. He then was nominated for the Nobel Prize a whole bunch of times and spent 15 years leading groups on foot back to their villages. He said, you can't ride in a bus or the back of a truck. You have to reclaim your land with a bell and a gong, chanting loving kindness with every step. Thousands of people following him to reclaim their land and their hearts. So coming down here, Trudy and I traveling, we were with some family and heard about a dear friend who had lost a child who had just died and kind of worked with them some. And then coming to Esalen, I understand that there's been a death in the community. And it really touches my heart to know this of a young person who was, part of the community, not on the property, but not far away. And here we are. We sit in the midst of this mystery of birth and death. And this is the reality that we're given. There's our individual lives and the lives of those around us, which are really quite tentative, And here at Esalen, on the edge of the great ocean, somehow we're invited to take our seat in this mystery. And it's not just the personal losses that many have spoken of in our group, But there's climate change and continuing racism and injustice and the refugees and the suffering around the world that we also carry, the cultural anxiety. And in one way, we can live in denial about this, that it's not so, that we're exempt, that we can hide. And our culture is pretty good at that, I'm sorry to say. But there's another alternative. Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh said, when the crowded Vietnamese refugee boats met with storms or pirates, if everyone panicked, all would be lost. But if even one person remained centered and calm on the boat, they showed the way for everyone else to survive. And so here we're given in community, in family, in our lives, joy and sorrow, birth and death. We're given the responsibility to hold ourselves in a web of love. And we become, guess who? As Miss Piggy would say, moi. We become that one person on the boat. And to do that is to become a bodhisattva, a being who turns the compass of their heart to the direction of compassion, to say, no matter what happens, even if the sun arises in the west, no matter the changes, I will bring compassion and care to alleviate suffering for the well-being of all who surround me. And we trust somehow that that actually is important and meaningful, because it's easy to get lost in despair these days, you know. And somehow they actually want you to feel like you're powerless, and that, you know, the despair is kind of woven into the news narrative. But here's Mahatma Gandhi. When I despair, so if you despair, just know you have good company and common humanity here. Gandhi ji also despairing. When I despair, I remember that all through history, the way of truth and love has always won. Yes, there have been murderers and tyrants, and for a time they can seem invincible, but in the end, they always fall. Think of it, always. And this gives heart from this timeless place when you quiet the mind and tend yourself to realize that there is a way you can live in this world and sow and plant seeds of beauty and stand up for what matters and tend your own life with its measure of tears and its beauty. That this is possible for you. And Esalen, especially for those of you who are on staff, is a temple. And you are the pujaris. The pujaris is the word in India for the people who sweep the floor in the temple and clean the altar and take the prasad and offer the food. You're actually the closest to the gods, basically. Believe it or not. You're the keepers of the fire in the temple, and you allow the pilgrims who want to renew and remember their connection with what's holy to come into your temple, and you tend them so that something new and beautiful can be born in them. And this is the work of the heart. Yes, you think you're sitting today just to become quiet and learn how to heal in some inner ways, but you're also learning a kind of courage and a presence and a deep trust that you can go through and hold the joys and sorrows of life, not as a grim duty, but that you have beauty in this world and gifts to offer it. And that you can trust, as my friend Dina Metzger, a great poet, and some of you may have seen her, there's a famous picture of her from like 30 years ago. A wonderful poet and activist and so forth. She had a mastectomy, one breast removed, and she had a great dragon tattooed across her chest and her body before tats were so, hip and everybody had them. And there she is with one hand in the air and this huge dragon across her chest, reciting some beautiful poem that she'd written. She writes, "Give me everything mangled and bruised, and I will make a light of it to make you weep. And we will have rain and begin again." And for all those who've passed, who we honor, and who died, and we have to honor and do our rituals and our prayers, and for those who are alive and for those who are coming in, we do our practice not just for ourselves, but we become that bodhisattva who sits and then goes out and mends what we can and touches and sweeps the garden of the world. So the work you do is here cannot be separated from the gifts that you offer with every interaction and every breath as you move through the world.
That was beautiful, Jack.
Oh, thank you, dear.
I'm kind of mesmerized. Yeah. I'm really sorry for the loss that this community has suffered, and I think it's really true what Jack is saying, that may not be so clear to you when you're in the midst of maybe an unfamiliar silence for many of you, and doing your practice of sitting and walking and trying to be silent, to remember to be silent. It can be not always clear what this has to do with helping others or helping the world or anything really, except the struggle to sort of corral your own mind and heart to be present. And that word bodhisattva means awakening beings, and we are all awakening beings here, that we've set our hearts on both loving awareness, falling in love with awareness. I am in love with awareness, and what I fear most is unconsciousness, my own and other people's, because mostly the people that have hurt me in my life have not been so conscious about deciding to do that. More like a side effect or byproduct of other things they were doing. So loving awareness, loving consciousness, loving getting to know ourselves. And there's a shift in our practice when we start to, when something we see that might be hard to see, like somebody was talking about over here yesterday, I think Matt, that instead of it just being like terrible news about ourselves, it might still be, but it's also something that we want to see. We want to know. And when that shift happens, where we actually want to know because we know that's where the pay dirt is in our practice, then we are truly loving awareness. And then there's the loving awareness of trying to suffuse our mindfulness practice with some tenderness and compassion, so that it doesn't, as I said, devolve into that sort of self-surveillance feeling. And we all share, we share a great vulnerability. My Zen teacher, Kobun Chino Otogawa, Soto Zen monk, used to say, spiritually, we are all the same size. But I didn't believe him. He seemed so much more enlightened than I. And then he went on to say, 6 feet deep. Remember that program, 6 feet under? Like, we are all the same size because we all are facing this vulnerability of our mortality. And it's just completely true for each one of us. And although the worlds and the lives that we construct seem solid and our relationships seem more or less stable, and, there are things we definitely count on in this life, like when you go home, that your couch will still be in the living room. There are just things that seem so solid and that we count on being ongoing in our lives. And yet, the Buddha expressed it so clearly. Whatever has the nature to arise has the nature to pass away. Every single thing. What do we know about all our relationships? Every one. Yeah, they will end. If only because we end, they will end. And sometimes things end in a way that feels it's in the natural order of things. We know that when we grow old, dying happens at a certain point. And sometimes there are deaths that are really out of order deaths, like when a child dies before a parent dies. The Zen story of the people who went to get a blessing from a great teacher, and they climb 1,000,000 steps up the mountain, and they're sweaty and they're out of breath, and they sit down and get ready for their blessing. And the teacher says, may your grandparents die, may your parents die, may you die, and may your children die. The person's incensed. Wait a minute, we came for a blessing, not a curse. And then the teacher points out, if it happens in that order, that is a blessing in our lives. We don't think of it that way, but that is actually a blessing. An out of order death is painful, and deaths from wars and violence and are more painful. In the Heart Sutra, which is a kind of almost like the national anthem of Zen, they chant it every day in the Zen monasteries, and part of the chant goes, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. How many of you have heard this before? Yeah, quite a few of you. It's easier for us to understand that emptiness is form, that everything arises out of nothing. And if you don't understand it, watch a baby be born, and then you understand it. It's a little harder to understand that form is emptiness. But again, sit with someone who is dying while they die and after they die. And then it's easier to understand that. And at the end of the Heart Sutra, it's really a kind of hymn, an ode to the emptiness of everything, the emptiness that, as Dan said, is fullness and richness, that is our life in the form of each one of us. And it says, Gate, Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate Bodhiswaha. And this is a mantra that is usually translated as gone, gone, gone beyond, gone beyond, and then homage to that process of transcending and going beyond the rim into the hub or into the plane of possibilities. The translation that Goban used was different. He said, falling apart, everything, I'm paraphrasing, falling apart, everything constantly falling apart. It can't be helped. And that was his translation of the mantra at the end of the Heart Sutra. The first time I saw it, I was shocked. What do you mean everything's falling apart? It just stimulated all of my anxieties. But all the women in my family have a lot of anxiety. I think that's probably why I meditated so much. But then I realized this is also a great comfort because it's true. And it's like what Jack was saying, just acknowledging the universality. This is true. And then we don't have to struggle with it quite so much. We can accept falling apart, all together falling apart. It can't be helped. We're doing this together, this falling apart. In a way, retreat is where we come to be safe so we can fall apart more consciously and not have to maintain our social persona and looking good and really know that we're taken care of. So it's safe to let ourselves just fall apart and see what's there, what's here for us.